The rain-slicked streets of Manhattan whispered secrets as I stood frozen in the doorway of his penthouse. The words, "I have to marry her tomorrow," slicing through the humid air like a blade. Ronan's hand trembled on the doorknob. His hazel eyes, those eyes that had once burned for me alone, now dulled by the weight of a life he couldn't escape, while the city lights flickered mockingly behind him, indifferent to the shatter of my world. In that instant, as thunder cracked overhead, I realized our nights of stolen fire were ending not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a door sealing my heart in exile. I had known this reckoning was coming, but nothing prepared me for the hollow ache that followed, the way his cologne lingered on my skin like a ghost refusing to fade. Ronan and I had met 6 months earlier in the dim haze of a Soho speakeasy, where the jazz hummed low and the air tasted of bourbon and unspoken desires. I was Elias Kane, 28, a freelance illustrator scraping by in a cramped walk-up in the East Village, my days filled with sketches of half-formed dreams and my nights chasing the thrill of anonymity in a city that devoured the vulnerable. He was Ronan Hale, 29, the golden boy of an Upper East Side architecture firm, heir to a legacy of glass towers and old money. His life a meticulously planned blueprint that left no room for deviations like me. That first night, the bar was a velvet cocoon, walls lined with leather-bound books and candles flickering like hesitant confessions. I nursed a whiskey neat, my fingers smudged with charcoal from a late afternoon commission, when he slid onto the stool beside me, his tailored shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal the sharp line of his collarbone. "You look like you're drawing the shadows instead of escaping them," he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the saxophone's wail. I glanced up, caught in the intensity of his gaze, hazel flecked with gold, like autumn leaves caught in a storm, and laughed, a sound too raw for the polished crowd around us. We talked for hours, the conversation weaving through the architecture of forgotten buildings and the fragile lines of human connection. He spoke of his firm's latest project, a gleaming high-rise in Midtown that would pierce the sky like a declaration of ambition, but his eyes betrayed a weariness, a crack in the facade. I shared sketches from my portfolio, doodles of lovers tangled in urban decay, and he leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear as he traced a finger along the edge of my paper. "This is you," he murmured, hiding beauty in the broken places. By midnight, we were stumbling out into the drizzle, his hand brushing mine accidentally. Or was it? And when our lips met under the awning of a shuttered bookstore, it felt like the city itself had conspired to ignite us. Those early weeks were a fever dream of discovery, our meetings cloaked in the anonymity of Manhattan's underbelly. We'd rendezvous at Hidden Gems, a derelict pier on the Hudson where the water lapped greedily at rusted pilings, or a rooftop in Chelsea where graffiti murals bled into the stars. Ronan was a force, confident in boardrooms, commanding in the way he navigated the city's pulse. But with me, he unraveled. His touches were tentative at first, exploratory, as if testing the waters of a forbidden sea. I'd pull him close in the shadow of a warehouse wall, my heart pounding with the thrill of the illicit, and he'd surrender, his broad frame melting against mine, lips hungry and unpracticed in their fervor. One night, under the Brooklyn Bridge's iron lace, he confessed fragments of his truth. "I've always known," he whispered, his voice muffled against my neck as we lay on a threadbare blanket. "The river's murmur, our only witness. But my family, the firm, it's all built on this version of me that isn't real." His father, a titan of real estate with a penthouse view of the Park Avenue elite, had mapped out Ronan's life like one of his blueprints. Harvard undergrad, Columbia grad school, a strategic engagement to Lila Voss, the poised daughter of a shipping magnate, whose porcelain smile and impeccable pedigree promised alliances and heirs. Lila was everything Manhattan's old guard revered, blonde, 27, a curator at the Met with a laugh like tinkling crystal and eyes that saw only the surface of things. I hated her before I even met her, not for who she was, but for the cage she represented, the gilded bars Ronan had willingly stepped into. Yet in those stolen hours, she was a distant specter, banished by the heat of his skin against mine. We'd wander the village's cobblestone alleys, hand in hand only after dark, pausing in doorways to kiss with the urgency of thieves. My tiny studio became our sanctuary, walls plastered with my evolving portraits of him. Ronan in profile, jaw set against the dawn. Ronan laughing, head thrown back in rare abandon. He'd arrive with takeout from hole-in-the-wall delis, bottles of cheap Chianti, and we'd lose ourselves in each other, bodies entwined on my sagging futon, the city's symphony of horns and sirens fading into irrelevance. But cracks formed early, subtle as the first frost on a window pane. Ronan would glance at his watch mid-embrace, murmuring apologies about dinner with the folks or client calls, his phone buzzing with Lila's texts, innocent check-ins that twisted like knives in my gut. I'd push it down, tell myself it was the price of this wild, improbable love, but doubt crept in like fog off the East River. One evening, after a particularly fervent night where he'd whispered my name like a prayer, he pulled away abruptly, dressing in the moonlight filtering through my fire escape. "Elias, this, us, it's everything I didn't know I needed," he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I can't blow up my life. Not yet. Not yet. The words haunted me, a promise laced with poison. I wanted to rage, to demand he choose the fire we kindled over the cold architecture of expectation, but fear silenced me. The fear of being just another secret, discarded when the dawn broke. Instead, I held him tighter that night, memorizing the curve of his shoulder, the scar on his rib from a childhood fall, the way his breath hitched when I traced the line of his spine. We made love slowly, then deliberately, as if etching our bond into eternity, but even as ecstasy crested, I felt the undercurrent of goodbye. As summer bled into fall, our rhythm intensified, a desperate dance against the ticking clock of his engagement. Manhattan, with its relentless energy, became our accomplice and tormentor. The subways rattling us from one clandestine spot to another, the parks offering brief illusions of normalcy, where we'd sit on benches, knees brushing, pretending we were just two guys sharing coffee. Ronan opened up more, sharing stories of his closeted youth. Summers at the Hamptons faking crushes on girls while stealing glances at the lifeguards, the suffocating weight of his father's approval tied to straight-laced success. "You're the first person who's ever seen me," he told me one crisp October evening, as we walked the High Line's elevated paths, the Hudson glittering below like shattered glass. Really seen me. And God, I did. In my sketches, in a way I anticipated his needs, a fresh sketch pad when his stress peaked, a quiet jazz playlist for our drives upstate. I poured my soul into loving him. But love, in the shadows, exacts a toll. I'd lie awake after he left, staring at the ceiling cracks that mirrored my fracturing heart, wondering if I was complicit in his deception. Lila's presence loomed larger. He'd mention her in offhand ways. "She's great at these galas, keeps the conversations flowing." And each word was a splinter under my skin. I imagined her, elegant in emerald gowns at fundraisers, oblivious to the man she thought she knew, while I claimed his truths in the dark. The turning point came on a blustery November night, 2 months before the wedding. We'd escaped to a speakeasy in the Bowery, the kind with passwords and velvet ropes, where the air hung heavy with cigar smoke and regret. Ronan was late, his text cryptic, stuck at the office, and when he arrived, his tie askew and eyes shadowed, I knew something had shifted. We drank in silence at first, the bartender's clink of ice the only punctuation, until he set down his glass with a thud that echoed my dread. "Elias," he started, his voice barely above the murmur of patrons, "Lila's family is pushing the date up. The merger, it's happening faster than I thought." Merger. The word reduced her to a business transaction, but it gutted me all the same. I reached for his hand under the table, our fingers interlacing like lifelines, but he pulled away, scanning the room as if spies lurked in every corner. "We can't keep doing this. It's killing me," lying to everyone. To her. The accusation stung, though it was aimed at himself. "Then stop," I whispered fiercely, my green eyes locking onto his, willing him to see the plea beneath my anger. "Choose us. Choose you." For a heartbeat, hope flickered, his jaw clenched, tears welling as he leaned in, our foreheads touching in that sacred space we'd carved out. "I want to," he breathed. "God, Elias, you make me want to burn it all down." But dawn always comes to Manhattan, relentless and unforgiving. He left that night with a kiss that tasted of salt and finality, promising we'd talk after the holidays. The weeks that followed were a torment of half measures. Hurried texts, a furtive lunch in a crowded diner where his knee pressed against mine under the Formica table, each moment laced with the urgency of impending loss. Christmas lights twinkled mockingly along Fifth Avenue as I wandered alone, sketching carolers and couples while Ronan attended galas with Lila, his Instagram curated with photos of them toasting champagne flutes, her hand on his arm like a claim staked. By January, the air was brittle with cold, and so was I. Our last full night together was in my studio, snow dusting the windows like forgotten confetti. He arrived unannounced, coat dusted white, carrying a bottle of vintage scotch and a desperation that mirrored my own. We didn't speak at first. Words had failed us too many times. Instead, we moved to the rhythm of what we knew, his hands mapping my body like blueprints of a home he'd never built, my lips tracing the lines of tension in his neck. In the afterglow, tangled in sheets that smelled of us, he finally broke. "I love you, Elias, more than anything. But this life, it's swallowing me whole." Tears traced paths down his cheeks, and I wiped them away, my own vision blurring. "Then let me pull you out," I begged, my voice cracking with the rawness of it all. We held each other until the sky lightened, the city stirring below like a beast awakening. And when he dressed to leave, I felt the fracture deepen. "One more night," he murmured at the door, echoing the lie we'd both clung to. But as he vanished into the elevator, I knew the mornings were winning. The engagement party was the catalyst, a glittering affair at the plaza where crystal chandeliers dripped light like liquid gold, and the elite of Manhattan mingled in tailored tuxes and designer gowns. Ronan had invited me as a colleague from the firm, a cruel fiction that placed me at a corner table, nursing a flute of indifferent champagne while watching him across the ballroom. Lila was radiant in ivory silk, her laughter cascading as she danced with him, her fingers laced through his in a picture of domestic bliss. He caught my eye once, a fleeting glance loaded with apology and ache, but the distance between us yawned like the chasm of the Grand Canyon. I slipped out early, the cold January wind slapping my face as I hailed a cab back to the village, my sketchbook clutched like a shield. That night, alone with the hum of my radiator, I drew him, not as the lover I'd known, but as the man he might become. Free, unburdened, standing tall against a skyline of his own design. It was cathartic, a quiet rebellion, but sleep evaded me, haunted by visions of tuxedos and vows. February brought the bachelor party, a raucous escape to a lodge in the Catskills that Ronan insisted I'd join under the guise of old college buddy. The drive-up was tense, snow flurries blurring the windshield as we rode in silence. The other guys, frat boy relics from his undergrad days, belting out classic rock from the back seat. In the cabin's firelit glow, with whiskey flowing and poker chips scattered, Ronan pulled me aside to the porch, the woods whispering around us. "I can't do this without you knowing," he said, his breath fogging the air. "Every day, I wake up hating myself for not calling it off." "Then don't," I urged, stepping closer, the heat of him cutting through the chill. Our kiss was fierce, a clash of need and despair, hands fisting in coats as the wind howled approval. But the others called us back, their jokes about cold feet, landing like punches, and by morning, as we skied the powdery slopes, I saw the resolve hardening in his eyes, the walls rebuilding brick by brick. Back in the city, the wedding loomed like a storm front, invitations embossed with gold leaf mocking me from his coffee table during a stolen afternoon. We met in his office that day, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing the chaos of Midtown, blueprint strewn like battle plans. "Elias, please understand," he pleaded, pulling me in his lap on the leather couch, his touch both tender and frantic. "After, maybe things will change. I can figure out a way." The after was a mirage, shimmering but untouchable. We made love there, amid the sterile lines of his desk, my body arching under his as if to imprint permanence. But as he straightened his tie afterward, murmuring about fittings and rehearsals, I felt the first true stirrings of anger. Not at him, but at the world that had scripted this tragedy. "What if there is no after?" I asked softly, buttoning my shirt with shaking hands. His silence was answer enough, a chasm widening between us. The rehearsal dinner was held at his parents' brownstone on the Upper East Side, a bastion of mahogany paneling and crystal decanters where old money whispered through every crevice. I wasn't invited, of course, but curiosity, or masochism, drove me to linger across the street in a shadowed doorway, watching limos disgorge the guests. Ronan emerged last, arm linked with Lila's, his smile practiced perfection as flashbulbs popped. For a split second, his gaze swept the sidewalk, searching, and our eyes met through the dusk. The pain in that look, raw, unfiltered, nearly buckled my knees. I fled to a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen, drowning the image in cheap beer and the jukebox's mournful blues. My phone buzzed with his text. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." I didn't reply, the words too heavy for pixels. Instead, I sketched the scene from memory. Ronan in black tie, Lila's hand on his elbow, the brownstone's glow, a false halo, infusing it with the undercurrent of our truth, the love that pulsed beneath the facade. As the wedding eve approached, our final rendezvous was inevitable. A collision course set in the penthouse he'd rented overlooking Times Square. The elevator ride up was eternal, my pulse thundering as the doors parted to reveal him waiting, shirt untucked, a glass of bourbon in hand. "Elias," he breathed, crossing the marble floor in 3 strides to crush me against him, his kiss a torrent of desperation. We didn't waste words, clothes shed in a trail to the bedroom, bodies colliding with the ferocity of last rites. In the tangled sheets, with neon billboards casting erratic colors across our skin, he finally voiced the unvoicable. "I wish I could be brave like you," he said, tracing the tattoos on my forearm, swirling vines I'd inked after my own coming out at 22, a defiant bloom amid my conservative Midwest roots. "You've built a life on your terms, sketches and all. Me? I'm just trapped." "You're not trapped," I countered, propping on an elbow to meet his gaze, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "You're choosing this, and that's the part that breaks me." The honesty hung between us, sharp as shattered glass, and for the first time, anger flared in his eyes. Not at me, but at the mirror of his choices. We argued then, voices rising over the city's hum, accusations flying like shrapnel, my idealism versus his pragmatism, my freedom a taunt to his chains. But anger burned into passion, and we reclaimed each other one last time, slow and deliberate, memorizing every gasp, every shiver. As dawn crept in, painting the skyline in reluctant gold, he dressed with mechanical precision, the ring box on the nightstand a silent accuser. "Will you be okay?" he asked, voice cracking as he paused at the door. The question hung, absurd in its tenderness. "I have to be," I replied, forcing a smile that tasted of ash. "Go build your empire, Ronan. But remember, Empires fall when they're built on lies. He nodded, tears spilling unchecked, and then he was gone, the door clicking shut like the final note of a dirge. Alone in the vast emptiness of his space, I curled into the sheets, still warm from him, sobs racking my frame until exhaustion claimed me. When I woke, the sun blazed high, mocking the night with its indifference, and the reality crashed down. Today, he would marry her. The wedding was at St. Bartholomew's, that Gothic jewel on Park Avenue where stained glass filtered light into kaleidoscopes of color, and vows echoed like judgments. I didn't go, of course, couldn't bear the spectacle, but the city buzzed with it, social feeds alight with photos of the couple exchanging rings under the chancel arch, Lila's veil a cascade of lace, Ronan's smile a masterpiece of restraint. I spent the morning wandering the Met, losing myself in the Egyptian wing where mummies slumbered eternal, their secrets sealed in linen wrappings much like mine. By afternoon, the weight pressed too heavy, and I found myself at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village, the same one where we'd shared our first tentative brunch months ago. The barista, a wiry guy with a rainbow pin on his apron, slid my latte over with a knowing nod. "Rough day?" he asked, and I laughed, a brittle sound that surprised us both. You could say that. As the hours ticked toward the reception at the Pierre, my phone remained silent. No texts, no calls, just the void where his presence had been. I imagined him dancing with her under crystal chandeliers, her head on his shoulder, while I sketched strangers at nearby tables, infusing their faces with fragments of him. A jawline here, a hazel glint there. The pain was a living thing, coiling in my chest, but beneath it stirred something fiercer, resolve, perhaps, or the first green shoots of rebirth. Dusk fell as I made my way to Washington Square Park, the arch looming like a portal to forgotten revolutions. Students strummed guitars, couples picnicked on the grass, and I sat on a bench, pulling out my pad to draw the scene. Not as observer, but participant. For the first time since the eve, I sketched myself into the frame. Elias Kane, unbowed, green eyes alight with possibility, a half-smile hinting at horizons yet unexplored. It was a small act, but revolutionary, a declaration that my story didn't end with his choice. Night deepened, the park's lamps casting pools of gold, and as jazz drifted from a nearby club, I felt the city's pulse sync with mine again, not as a thief in the shadows, but as a survivor staking claim. Ronan had left me to marry her, yes, but in the quiet aftermath, I discovered the secret he'd given me all along, the power to love without apology, to build from ruins. And in the nights of Manhattan that followed, I would no longer be anyone's hidden verse. I'd write my own epic, bold and unbroken. The reception photos flooded in later that evening, courtesy of a mutual acquaintance's inadvertent share. Ronan and Lila cutting the cake, her joy unfeigned, his eyes distant as if gazing through veils. I deleted them without a second look, the act of severance I hadn't known I needed. Instead, I poured a glass of the scotch he'd left behind and toasted to ghosts that burned down my throat of baptism. Sleep came fitfully that night, dreams tangled with memories, his laugh echoing off warehouse walls, the press of his body in stolen taxis. But morning brought clarity, sharp as the winter sun slicing through my blinds. I rose, brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and spread my sketches across the floor, a gallery of us, of him, of the love that had reshaped me. One by one, I tore them, not in destruction, but release, the shreds fluttering like confetti from a parade long past. By noon, I was at my desk, fingers flying over a new commission, a mural for a queer youth center in Brooklyn, vibrant strokes of color depicting figures emerging from shadows into light. It felt right, purposeful, the lines flowing freer than they'd in months. A text pinged midway, from Theo, a sculptor I'd met at an art crawl last spring, his words casual but warm. Heard about the wedding. Drinks tonight? My treat. I hesitated, thumb hovering, then typed back. Absolutely. Let's make it a night to remember. As I hit send, a smile tugged unbidden. The first genuine one since the penthouse door clicked shut. Theo was easy company, unburdened by legacies, his own coming out a boisterous affair at a pride rally that left him with a network of chosen family and a laugh that could thaw glaciers. We met at a bistro in Nolita, fairy lights twinkling overhead as snow flurried outside, turning the streets into a wonderland. Theo enveloped me in a bear hug, his beard tickling my cheek, and over plates of gnocchi and glasses of robust red, he listened without judgment as I spilled the saga, not the polished version, but the raw, aching truth. You deserve someone who shouts your name from the rooftops, he said, clinking his glass to mine, his brown eyes steady with the kind of empathy born from shared battles. We walked afterward, arms brushing as we navigated the slick sidewalks, the conversation shifting to lighter waters. His latest installation, a tangle of recycled metal symbolizing fractured identities mended, my mural ideas blooming under his enthusiasm. At my door, he paused, hand lingering on my elbow. Elias, you're not just surviving this, you're thriving. And that's the sexiest thing I've seen in ages. His kiss was gentle, exploratory, a question rather than a demand, and I answered with a nod, pulling him inside. The night unfolded like a new sketch, tentative lines giving way to bold strokes. Theo's touch was different, grounded, present, without the undercurrent of haste. And in his arms, I felt seen, not as a secret, but as a story worth telling aloud. We talked until the sky lightened, sharing vulnerabilities like trading cards, his ex's betrayal at a gallery opening, my Midwest family's radio silence after my truth. Dawn found us entwined, the city awakening to our quiet laughter, and for the first time in months, hope felt tangible, a warmth seeping in a bones long chilled. Spring arrived with tentative mercy, cherry blossoms dusting the paths of Central Park like pink promises. The mural took shape on the center's wall, vibrant figures hand in hand against a backdrop of Manhattan spires, each stroke a testament to resilience. Ronan reached out once, a hesitant email, 3 weeks post-wedding. Honeymoon was beautiful, but you're in every sunset. Miss you. I read in a cafe, heart-twisting, but deleted without reply. Forgiveness would come, perhaps, but not at the cost of my forward momentum. Theo and I deepened. Our dates a mosaic of the city's hidden joys. Picnics on the pier with skyline views, poetry slams in the Bowery where his hand anchored mine during thunderous applause. He met my ragtag circle of artist friends at a loft party in Williamsburg, his easy charm winning them over as we danced to indie tracks, bodies swaying in sync. This is what real looks like, he whispered one night, as we lay on a blanket under the stars from a fire escape perch, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my chest. And he was right. The authenticity of it, unmarred by shadows, was a revelation. Yet echoes of Ronan lingered, subtle as graffiti faded on a wall. A blueprint exhibit at the MoMA featured his firm's work, and I attended alone, standing before the scale model of his high-rise, its lines echoing the architecture of his touch. Pride swelled unexpectedly. Not jealousy, but pride in the man who dared to love me, flawed as it was. I sent a postcard later, and signed, "Your towers touch the sky. Keep reaching." It was closure, a bridge burned with grace. Summer hummed in with festivals and fireflies, Theo and I joining the Pride March. Rainbows draped over our shoulders as we chanted for visibility, for love unchained. In the throng, amid the bass thump of floats and the sea of flags, I glimpsed a freer version of myself. The boy from Ohio who'd fled small-town stares, now striding tall beside a partner who matched my stride. That night, under confetti rain, we kissed in the crowd, unhurried, unhidden, the city's roar our anthem. By fall, the mural unveiled to fanfare, queer youth tracing its lines with awestruck fingers, sharing stories that mirrored my own. Ronan and Lila's life played out in glossy society pages, charity balls, architectural awards, but whispers reached me of strains, of late nights at the office masking deeper unrest. I wished him well in silence, the ache dulled to a scar, a reminder of growth forged in fire. One crisp October evening, as leaves carpeted the High Line, Theo proposed a trip upstate, a cabin retreat to sketch and sculpt in tandem. We drove with windows down, his hand on my thigh, the radio crooning ballads of redemption. In the woods' embrace, away from Manhattan's glare, we built something enduring. Not a secret, but a foundation. As stars wheeled overhead, his voice soft in the dark. "I love you, Elias. All of you, every line in shadow." And in that moment, with the river murmuring nearby, I knew the nights of Manhattan had been my crucible, forging from heartbreak a love luminous and true. Ronan's departure had left me to marry her, but in the mornings that followed, I married myself, to authenticity, to art, to the boundless capacity for joy. The city, ever the storyteller, had whispered its lesson. Secrets fade, but the heart's bold script endures, etching stories that outlast the dawn.